Hi, everybody. Welcome to Celestial You. We're back with Nelly today. And today we wanted to talk about depression.
Yay. No, just kidding.
Oh, yay. No, actually, in all seriousness, we know that right now is a difficult time for many people in the collective. I actually, with Laura Barat, am going over the astrology. So if you are curious which parts of our collective are most affected by depression, and I think this episode is going to really help folks understand what depression is from different perspectives, and really from a spiritual perspective, because that's really important. We know the clinical definitions of depression, the medical definitions of depression are often non-comprehensive or incomprehensible in the face of, you know, really the changes that are happening in humanity. And so I'm really happy to have Nelly here to help us gain perspective on a different way of looking at depression and really possibly ways of handling it in a healthy or at least purposeful way. So, so even though this is like a tough subject, I think it's really timely to discuss. And I'm really happy that Nelly is courageous enough to like shed her light on this subject, because it is often a subject that's left in the dark for many people. And that's why, you know, it is also the dark night of the soul. So we're going to go over all of that. Nelly's going to share with us some information about that to start out with. So welcome, Nelly.
Thank you, Ida. Thanks for having me. This is a subject that's very intimate to me, just because I've gone through bouts of depression throughout my life. And it started at a really young age. And, you know, when I talk to other people in spiritual circles, and, you know, it doesn't really matter what modality that might be, a lot of people just call it, you know, the dark night of the soul. And I'm like, what is that? You know? And I think in our contemporary society, we just think like, you know, there's this whole like community. It's like, oh, you found spiritual stuff, you know, discounting it because you were depressed, instead of the opposite. Like, you were depressed because you hadn't found your spiritual path yet. You haven't found your soul purpose yet. And instead of supporting people through that process of finding their soul purpose, you know, we kind of leave them behind and just like, here, maybe it's medication is the answer, or maybe it's just, you know, resignation, that you're just supposed to work a job for money and then live your life when you're not outside of work. Maybe it's that kind of thing. And these kinds of attitudes are programs that we're you know, trying to unravel, because it's not working in my opinion. And this is just my opinion about it, that it's not working. Maybe it is working for you, and you're here and you're like, I don't know why I'm here, but, you know, just take a little listen, a little open-minded of like what it is that.
Yeah, I think part of the part that really upsets me is when people assume that because you're going through a spiritual journey that you are going crazy.
And so, I mean, yeah, maybe that's true, but and maybe by conventional standards, you know, now on the other side of that, you can say great, because the way that most people are living their lives, from my standpoint, is crazy. Like, to deny that there's, you know, spirits out there, or that we have a spiritual path, or that we have, you know, perfect spiritual DNA, that we can express it through our life path and soul purpose.
And also, I also am posting a collaboration I did with Laura Barat, and I think you guys should check that out, especially if you do feel like you're breaking a lot of eggs right now to make your cake, so to speak, and you're going through a time of unrest, because there are astrological ramifications and rites of passage that are happening for some of our collective that can result in depression-like manifestation or erratic behavior as well, that look erratic from the outside in. So I just wanted to say that as Nelly helps us define and look at this through a different lens, that there are many of you who are actually going through a rite of passage that is kind of shaking you up and may manifest in these things. So this is why it's important to cover right now, this subject. So do you want me to pull it up? Or
yes, if you could, that would be really awesome.
Okay, cool. Guys, so I'm gonna let Nelly go over this. Do you want me to scroll up, or do you want to just go over this diagram?
I don't know what do you mean.
Oh, can you see it?
I can see it. Yeah, it's completely fine. It's like in the middle.
I don't know if you wanted to talk about the hero's journey first or the dark night of the soul.
Oh, this is good. Yeah, I find that, the dark night of the soul, like, what does that mean? And I've been asking that question for a good many years now. And I had this revelation recently. I was like, I think it's part of the hero's journey. Because just like, the laws of the universe, everything is good is also really bad. You can become really depressed and have a really shit situation, but then come out with a lot of reward after that, having gone through that experience, and then being able to lift everyone else up around you because you have gone through that experience. And if you are in the throes of depression right now, it's a very serious matter. I don't mean to make light of it and just be like, well, look to the future and everything will be fine. I mean, that's really a cop-out. I know how that sounds, but I just wanted to offer a little bit of a different take on it because, as Ida said, a lot of the conventional explanations out there are just really unsatisfactory sounding. Maybe they just don't sit well in the soul. And this is just what personally really helped me when I was going through my process. And so the hero's journey, I learned about this when I did a vision quest. And I'll talk about that some other time. It deserves its own time. But really, before you want to go out and find your soul purpose, and a lot of shamans do that through a vision quest, you want to lighten up. You kind of want to just start to get rid of the things, the thoughts and feelings that no longer serve you, and get rid of, the attitudes, the programming, the people in your life that just are no longer really helpful for you. And that requires going through this process of the hero's journey, which is coined by Joseph Campbell. And look it up, it's all over the internet. And so, you see that there's 12 steps here, and it goes around in this circle. And the first one is the ordinary world. You're just kind of living your life everything's fine, but then something doesn't feel quite right. And that's the call to adventure. And when I hear that, I think of your soul just wanting to expand itself. And a lot of times we hear this, in our culture of, you should just be satisfied with what you've got. Why aren't you happy? Why aren't you happy with, for me, it's, why aren't you happy just being a lawyer? You can earn gobs of money. Why don't you, as my dad would say, become a judge? You could easily do that. Why didn't, you aim for this or that position or that and that salary? So yeah. So ordinary world kind of thing, call to adventure, and a lot of dissuasion because of that. You're sitting there and you're like, what the fuck? Why aren't I happy? But then you're like, there's just something out there for me. What is that? And you hear all these people dissuading you, because most people, when they say it's about 97%, maybe a little bit more, just kind of live their lives as someone, within the construct of society as they tell them. And so maybe you'll refuse the call. And that's just a very normal process. Will I or won't I? It's very scary. There's a huge fear factor of it because, we don't know what's on the other side. And so perhaps, if you're really serious about it, you'll meet a mentor that can kind of help you with this. And I think it's really essential to have someone to guide you through this process. That's why we have people like Ida here to like read a chart for you, for instance, to see like, oh yeah, like confirmation. Oh yeah, your soul purpose. Like, yeah, you'd be great veterinary, that kind of thing. So that you can kind of like stop negotiating with the thoughts that say, well, you're too old now, or you're too young, or whatever it is that, people might normally say about not following your soul's path.
Yeah. And a quick footnote about people's charts. Some people can refuse the call and others astrologically cannot, because for some people, refusing the call will result in illness or mental illness. So there's just, there's a kind of like fire that goes along with this as well. Like, so for some of us, some people definitely could refuse the call, and others are going to be hugely compelled to proceed with it. And so, you can see that in your life mission readings through astrology.
And that's such a wonderful resource, Ida.
In case you're just wondering if it should be a hobby or if it's just like a do or die situation, you can really see the difference in astrology.
Mm-hmm. So, you might meet a mentor, but I think the mentorship, as I mentioned, is really important for finally crossing that threshold, because without that, we don't really have a model of seeing how can this work, or a model of success, or, and gosh, it's really interesting that Ida is now like blossoming into making videos and things like that, and becoming a mentor for other people to like look at and learn about astrology. That is just so essential. But with that, you'll have the tools to be able to then cross that threshold. And once you do, again, there are going to be people out there who are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And that's where I think the test, allies, and enemies comes in, because internally you're living your life a certain way, but you're programmed to, live it like that way. So, being able to change that programming, it's internally you're going through changes, and any doubts that you might have, which there will be reflected in the circumstances around you, which is where the tests, allies, and enemies might come in. That is just my thinking about it.
And those enemies could also be and many times are your family members.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, because they're just a mirror for us. And I won't get into that. I love my family, but
yeah. No, but I mean, not in the sense that they're an enemy, but that they are playing that role to serve as a test and they're showing you, like you said, a mirror of your own insecurities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so as we move forward through that, we go through this process and that's where it's really important in my mind to start, really categorizing and then purging what is important. What are your values? What is it that you really want in life? Do you want to satisfy your soul purpose, or do you want to satisfy, what your mom or your whoever wants for you? And when we don't go through that purge process, or we're not willing to express, we decide to go backwards and just live back in the ordinary world that we knew once before. A lot of times this is kind of, where things like depression can really sink in. Or in the process of dealing with, our soul's desires and trying to reprogram ourselves and rework that energy, transmute it, if you will, that could be really difficult in a process where, that depression might sink in. And in those instances where we're not able to, or we're not willing to just really go all the way through that process, we're not believing in ourselves fully, we're not going to get to that road back, to that ordeal, death, rebirth, to seizing that reward. We're not going to be able to seize it because we didn't go through the process. But really, it's through this journey as a whole that, we can really just see growth. And I think, in my personal opinion, that depression is just a symptom of wanting to go through this process of spiritual growth. There's more. I mean, I can talk about it from a shamanic worldview of depression, of someone else's opinion of what that was. And something that I thought was really helpful.
Yeah.
That I thought was giving me a different perspective on it was that there's a famous shaman named Malidoma Patrice Somé, and he is from West Africa in the Dagara tradition. Actually, when he was younger, around 4 years old, he was kind of taken from his village. Well, not kind of taken. He was taken from his village and then grew up in the Jesuit order. And grew up kind of like in that monastery and grew up to be a priest. And that was his tradition. And then, he had a huge ordeal that happened when he was 20 years old, and he got into a physical altercation with the priest. And throughout this time, he was like physically, emotionally abused and things like that. But in this moment, he got in a physical altercation and he had to leave. And at that point, he was so indoctrinated that he didn't know his traditional language anymore. And when he left, he didn't have any money or anything. He just had nothing. He just had to leave. So he traveled on foot back to his original village in Burkina Faso. And it's just a very compelling story. He writes about it in his books. And that was his dark night of the soul. But through this, he kind of like gets to later be reunited with his village, go through shamanic initiations, and came out of it as having both perspective of the Western world and the traditional world that he had, and then eventually brought that tradition to the US and was a shaman, did divinations with seashells for many years, and ended up in Oakland, California. It's a phenomenal story. Anyways, I'm giving this background because his tradition, Dagara people, they believe depression was good news because it was a sign of spirit wanting to express itself through you. And in that tradition, they believe that people who got depressed were really open spiritually. Can, for instance, maybe a really intuitive person or somebody who can access different realms or different, dimensions of spirit. And so for his perspective, if that person isn't well supported, they can become possessed by, disincarnate spirits that are not helpful versus the ones that want to come through and really offer healing. And in the shamanic tradition, spiritual possession can be voluntary and for healing. This is helping spirits that we work with. Yeah. We use their power for spiritual healing of people. It's that agreement, but without having a solid understanding of what that is or those abilities or the right support, then, you might be possessed in their tradition by unhelpful spirits that it can cause, a variety of issues. It might be addiction. It might.
It sounds a lot like when people just get stuck in the ordeal phase or the death phase of the rebirth process. And instead of understanding what's happening, they internalize it, and they can't quite shed their ego. So they just, they take it as a judgment on themselves. So then that's going to lower your vibration, and of course make you susceptible to all sorts of, stuckness and attachments and things like that. So, like, you're so right that you have to have the right type of encouragement, and not only just encouragement, but that person who's like gone through it and is on the other side. So you can kind of see through that it's going to be okay.
Right. So, I mean, it's just such an interesting topic and perspective on like this energy not necessarily being a part of you. It's not really who you are.
Right.
And that is something that, I hear, like, over the years, I heard said a lot, like, this addiction is not really who you are. But it didn't really sink in until I kind of read about this. And it made so much more sense to me that perhaps we're just not having, a spiritual help in the right way or acknowledgement of it. And perhaps if we did, then we...
And if you just ask, like, if you just want to have psychic abilities and you ask for your chakras to be open and your third eye to be open, that's all well and good. But usually that process is like a slow or methodical and hopefully a mentored process, because again, like, it's not easy to entertain spirit when you don't have like a context for it, and can get quite either stuck or not understand that some of the emotions you're being exposed to may or may not be yours, or are not to be, are really for you to observe and not inherent, so it's not an easy process. I do feel so many people are going through it though. Right.
Yeah. And I have so much compassion for everyone going through this. And after reading this, I have so much compassion for every narcissist I met in my life. Every, let me talk to the manager type person I've ever met. Like, there's just so much spiritual energy like running around us. Like, for instance, I don't have to read the news to know exactly what it says, because it's all buzzing around all around us, like all these crises all over the world, and all these disincarnate spirits as well, and all this energy. Because we live in society where we haven't really acknowledged its presence, although people are waking up to it. And I kind of wonder, Ida, after you and I discussed, the ascension process and, how it's part of the astrological rhythm and cycle right now, if that's just part of the waking up that, oh, yes, we're all unhappy and here's what we can do about it. And like, that is the ordeal of death and rebirth. And then seizing the reward is then finally being like, okay, and what can we do about it?
Yeah. And it's like, it's weird, because when you go through this hero's journey, the things that gave you comfort before may not comfort you. Like, life's luxuries are not going to comfort you anymore.
Yeah. Like mac and cheese is like
mac and cheese and sucking your thumb is just not going to get you through this, folks. Like, the things that we did as children to make ourselves feel good are not going to get you through the hero's journey. And so because we are going from the Kali Yuga, which was a physical dominant understanding of humanity, to the other Duva Para Yuga. And when we're in that state, it's all about the expansion of vibration, energy, and so we're actually in the ascending phase of that. And so, and with the Aquarian age also coming in, we really are seeing an acceleration of this understanding of, so Aquarius is actually vibration. So it used to be that if you had a problem, it was because you didn't have enough food or enough shelter. But now we're in a stage where our problems are changing because we're now facing and incorporating the vibration and the energies of the spiritual world. And technology is also growing in this area. But from an inner perspective, the age that we're in is a feminine age. So it's more of an age of reception, and it's more of an age of internal growth rather than external growth. So all of the coping mechanisms we have, like, as a pharmacist, I recognize that some people are going to go through mental illness to the point where they can't cope with it. And the approach they had in like the 1960s of institutionalizing people, lobotomizing people, injecting them with, medicines and things. Sometimes that's necessary today because people are violent towards others and things like that. But really, it's a chemical solution, and you can't apply a chemical solution to a vibrational or energetic problem. So we have an issue here. We definitely have, as I feel like as pharmacists, we really need to start understanding the range of therapeutic modalities, and not just the chemical, but homeopathic is a vibrational, energetic form of healing. Shamanism is a form of healing that's energetic. And so it's kind of like you can't keep using a scalpel and cut things out of people. You can't keep giving them pills for certain things when the problem is an energetic one. And what I guess from your perspective in shamanism and from my perspective in astrology, and I'll go over it, you guys should definitely watch. This is an energetic phase of what we're going through. So many of the problems people are facing are energetic in nature. So the recommendations we're going to have today are very different than like popping a Xanax because ultimately you can suppress them. And, you can go back into the refusal of the call. I can see that's, so ordinary world call to adventure, which may sound like, oh my gosh, I'm just not happy with my world. And I really want to do something else, but I don't know what that something else is. And then it's like you go to a doctor and they say you have anxiety and they give you Xanax. And so that's where you accept that and you say, okay, well, that's what was wrong with me. But years down the line, you find out, well, you know what? Actually, I was anxious because of this, that, and the other. It wasn't because of a Xanax deficit in my blood.
Yeah, 1984. What was it called? Like a Soma pill or something?
Yeah,
Soma. Yeah. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like, however, the times have been so hard that it's kind of like that do or die moment. You know what I mean? Unless if you're growing or disintegrating.
Yeah.
Saying that they have. And
it really too, like if you're interested where you're at with this, a lot of the energetic changes are told by the outer planets. So I would be looking at Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which I don't know that I've actually not done that for you, Nelly, but
that's okay.
It's fascinating because at least for me, I'm going through a Pluto transit in my 4th house, which is the house of inner happiness. And Pluto is the planet of death and transformation. So Pluto is literally that number 8, ordeal, death, and rebirth. And so a lot of it has to do with the position of Pluto and Uranus, where you're at. So if you feel like you're this is going on for you. And man, if you're a Taurus and you're not already spiritually awakened, I would be very surprised that you wouldn't be, or at least being heavily encumbered by the call for awakening at this point, because it's going to rattle you. So let's talk about
we're here to help.
What to do about it.
We're here to help everyone. I heard this so many times and I was like, oh, that's bullshit. Like in my throes of depression and stuff. But people would be like, keep a gratitude journal. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And like, for me, I was just so upset at different points in my life. I became so upset that it was really hard for me to just like write down, just getting the motivation to write something down I was grateful for, and then at that point, a lot of things had happened. And then eventually, thankfully, I did seek, like spirituality. But it wasn't until most recently that I was very consistent about keeping a gratitude journal that I had this like epiphany. And I was like writing down my gratitudes every day. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never written down before. I am so happy and grateful for my own life. And I was just like, wow, why not? And I really do think there is just some kind of quality about writing down your gratitudes, writing down the things that you really want in your life that really shift your vibration just like that. Just even one tiny thing, even if it's something superficial, like I'm so happy for me, it's tea because I sadly quit coffee, but I'm so happy and grateful for this tea today.
Yeah.
And that's how you start your day, and it sets the tone for your entire life. And I swear it works. It works. And there's scientific studies about this. People can refer to Mel Robbins's, high five, like rule. Is that what she calls it? It's like high-fiving yourself in the mirror every morning.
Yeah. There's like mirror work too. So if it's just that you are struggling because you have a really poor self-image, mirror work can be instrumental. If you can't look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I love you, like if you can't do that, and that's uncomfortable, then that's a sign that your self-esteem, is not where it could be. But just even just faking it and like just keep saying it, like Nelly said, the first time she was doing the gratitude, it was such a labor to do. But then over time, it becomes easier and it becomes more true, because whatever you say or write manifests over time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's all part of the law of vibration, shifting that, and then goes in the second law of attraction, and on and on and on.
And I wanted to actually say too, let me pull this out here. So I wanted to also talk about like the gratitude journal, mirror work is another thing. But when we were talking, when Nelly was like, oh, I want to talk about depression, I kind of jokingly was like, well, I can tell you how to get depressed. And we're like, well, maybe we shouldn't tell people that. But I think it's interesting. So I came up with 3 steps to being or staying depressed. And I'm only going to go over this because I think it's really telling. So step 1, focusing on something outside of your control, whether in the past or in the future, because the only real power we have is in the present moment. And so when we focus on the past or the future, and I know that comes off kind of funny from an astrologer, but even when I give predictions for the future, it's never to inspire like anxiety over those events happening or having people become attached to the outcome of those events. Focusing on something that is outside of your control in this moment is the first step to becoming depressed. Also, the second step is if you lose or let go of your dreams or your calling. Or in Nelly's presentation, it's refusing the call is a big reason why you would then get into depression. And then if you just submit to the collective energy of fear, control, and programming, then that will take you the rest of the way into like getting stuck into a depressed state. So this is just my personal experience. I didn't study this, but this is how I perceived it. And so if we agree that these are ways in which you can get depressed, then the opposite should help to assure that you won't stay in depression, because it's actually okay to have moments of negative emotion. We are human and we are meant to process energy. And many of us going through shifts right now will be exposed to energies that are uncomfortable to us, feelings that are uncomfortable because we are shedding our ego. We're going through that dark night of the soul. So focusing on the present moment is a way to combat this. And we can do this by detaching from controlling anything other than our thoughts and our actions in the right now. So entering a phase of acceptance for all circumstances is actually where your power is. So when it's incredibly unrewarding to try to control other people or events. So stepping back from that feeling of unrequited desire, the way you do that is you pull your attention into what you can do and you let go of controlling others and kind of accept what is. You accept what is. And then after that, if you can just take baby steps towards your dream or your mission in life, that's really all you have to do. And I got this really great quote from this book that I've been reading. It's called The 40 Rules of Love by El Shafak. And anyway, this book is amazing. It's about how Rumi met the love of his life and why he became a poet. So in this book, it says, fret not where the road will take you. Instead, concentrate on the first step. The hardest part, that's the hardest part, and that's what you are responsible for. Once you take that step, let everything basically happen naturally, and the rest will follow. Do not go with the flow, be the flow. So this is this is that idea of taking those baby steps in the right direction and then just kind of like letting go, or letting yourself be the flow or be in flow. And then the third thing I wanted to say is temporarily, at least, shut out the negative energies and influences in your life. So Nelly was talking about how part of the journey is you're going to come up against opposition. It's completely okay to shut out the opposition temporarily because yes, a flower can grow from concrete, but it is much harder to do so. So why not take your little seed that you're taking baby steps on and plant it into some nice fertile soil and get rid of all the concrete and all the negativity. And then that will help you during this process. And then the fourth thing I wanted to say, and possibly the thing that has helped me most, is to sit in the void. So one of the teachings in astrology is that there are 5 elements, and the 5th element is the ether. And so the ether is the void of creation. So before we can create, we have to sit in the void. So one of the things that's really hard about Dark Night of the Soul is as we're going through this transformation, we have to go from a place of nothingness to a place of somethingness. And the difference, or the way that we do that, is with our thoughts, right? So grooming our thoughts is incredibly important, but sometimes you don't know what the next step is. You don't know necessarily, you haven't filled in the grid of what's going to happen. And maybe a lot of it is in the unknown. Actually, right now with Rahu conjuncting Uranus, a lot of it is in the unknown. And so that can be quite unsettling for people. So remember that we can sit in the void, and the ether is where the knowledge comes from of the 5 elements. So the 5 elements are fire, water, air, and earth. And so I'm not going to go through all of them, but to suffice it to say that the ether is the element of space or void. And so in order to create anything out of life, you first have to accustom yourself with really not having the answers right away. And sometimes this can be a period of great instability, but other times, you know, in following some of the traditions that Nelly was outlining, with support, with a mentor who can hold space for that, holding space for the void is a very important part of elevating your spiritual connection. So I just wanted to put in there in case you're just in the baby steps of this, because we're going from Cancer season over to Leo season, and there's going to be a shift towards manifestation. So if you feel yourself in the void right now, having gone through a lot of the depressive episodes or just feelings of depression, you may be becoming upgraded at this moment so that you can poise yourself and allow for the knowledge to permeate through the ether into your creative space. So that's all I wanted to say about the importance of sitting in the void. Even though we're not taught to do that, we're taught to be a go, go, go culture. But again, now that we're shifting over to this more feminine approach of reception, part of the feminine is sitting in the void and receiving inspiration and receiving messages and receiving and downloading information, really to try to do things and put actions behind things when it's not the right time for that, or it's kind of going to be a struggle to push things up the mountain. But if you sit in the void and you connect with your higher self and strategize these things, you can actually be the flow and not push yourself. You will have to push yourself to make those first steps, but you don't have to push the boulder up the hill the same way that you did potentially when you were not pursuing a spiritual or healing career. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of go over that piece as something I thought might be helpful for folks. Do we have enough?
Complete. Maybe next time we can, talk about dream casting.
Yeah, I want to talk about dream casting. So can you just give people a teaser of like what it's about?
So I guess one way to put it would be to figure out, well, you talk about sitting in the void. So I want to put it in your terms and talk about sitting in the void, and what are you going to fill it with is kind of what dream casting does. It kind of helps you envision the life that you want, like a mental, what do they call those, vision boards, I guess?
Yeah.
So what will you manifest? And I think that's really important to do during these transitory phases, but also just in like everyday life, to just really take inventory every day of what is it that you really want to do, because it can change. Like 15 years ago, I really wanted to graduate law school and pass the bar. That's obviously changed.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's dream casting. It's a very brief exercise that we can do together next time.
Yeah, I'm excited about that, actually.
Great.
Because I think it's important to once you've sat in the void and you're ready to start painting with your paintbrush, having these tools to dream and sit down and basically manifest your vision is going to be extremely important. In fact, it's going to be really important for Leo season. So I think this is going to be extremely timely for folks. Leo, when the sun comes into Leo, it's going to be with Mercury. Mercury is the planet of manifestation. So we're actually priming the pump right now as we're going through our emotions and potentially our emotional garbage and releasing all of that. Once we're done doing that and we want to create a heart-centered approach to our life, the sun going into Leo is going to empower us to do that. So we need things like dream casting. We need things like astrological valuations of your life mission, vision boards, that kind of thing, to get inspired, because once the sun goes into Leo, we're going to be really putting our actions down. So, with this last bit of emotional processing happening, and with the new knowledge we gain about who we want to be, after the summer solstice, we kind of talked about that. We're going into who am I, and, how do I want to do this? How do I want to live this life? And once you incorporate that, then you have to go and get your vision on target. So I think this is really good timing.
Great.
As usual.
Of course it is. There's so much.
I wonder why we have such good time. It's almost like we're in touch with an invisible source.
Some might say that, or some might say we're crazy. I don't know.
Maybe you know what? I'm going back to Rumi. Like, I'm going to butcher this poem, but like, nothing has gone through the eye of the needle with a head intact. You have to lose your head to go through the eye of the needle. So sorry if I butchered that quote, but you get my meaning, that in this process, we lose our head, we lose our ego. And we we come out transformed. And that's the process. That's the hero's journey. And so, you know, sometimes I just think I don't want to be, if this is crazy, then I want to be crazy. So that's my choice.
Yeah, great. I'm crazy. Well,
cheers to that.
You know, like,
well, I want to thank Nelly again for joining us and bringing all this wonderful wisdom today and knowledge. Especially, I know that if folks are having a hard time, it's really nice to know that you're not alone. This is happening to a portion of our collective in a very intense way. And Nelly and I have both been through bouts of this over the years, and we are a resource to you for a different perspective on things that were commonly thought of as mental illnesses that may just be a sort of spiritual growing pains.
And if it's really bad, please call and talk to somebody, you know, please just honor yourself and go ahead and do that.
Yeah. And we can both refer you to actual medical professionals or therapists to help you if you need that kind of help. But in case this presentation has resonated with you and really has hopefully put you at ease in some ways, that was at least, I think, our objective is to give you another perspective. Okay. Great. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Ida. It's always such a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Nelly. I love you all. And keep your chin up, and we're all going to get through this. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Okay.